The day I got my acceptance letter from Harvard. My cousin knelt before me, clutching her stomach. She told me she was pregnant with my fiancé's baby and begged me to let them be together. I almost died laughing. I had been wondering how to break off the engagement with that scumbag anyway. Isn't graduating from a top school, inheriting the family business, and becoming a billionaire heiress a better deal? A man will only slow me down. After dying from overwork, I was reborn. The moment I opened my eyes, I was met with a pair of pitiful-looking ones. My cousin Sarah stood at my door in a plain white dress, holding a large suitcase. This was 1 month before the SATs. Sarah, a junior in college, had come to stay at our house, using the excuse that it was closer to her school. "Sarah, why didn't you tell your uncle you were coming? I would have picked you up." My dad pushed me aside, led Sarah into the house, and set her up in my room. Rubbing my arm where my dad had bumped me, I narrowed my eyes. What did I do last time? The painful memories came flooding back. Too proud to give up my room, I got into a huge fight with my dad, which ended with him slapping me across the face. Because of that, my mom had a massive blowout with him, and their already fragile relationship was pushed to the brink. Not only that, but in the days that followed, Sarah and my fiancé Chris were all over each other. Unwilling to let Sarah steal everything from me, I couldn't focus on my studies. All I could think about was how to get her out of my house and away from my fiancé. As a result, I, a straight-A student my whole life, completely bombed the college entrance exams and could only get into a community college. After that, my parents divorced and I stayed with my dad. Sarah framed me, claiming I pushed her down the stairs, and my dad threw me out of the house. With a $10 million wedding gift from my dad, Sarah married Chris, who came from an equally wealthy family. And me? After graduating from community college, I couldn't find a decent job, ended up on a factory assembly line, and died from overwork. Reborn, I willingly gave up my bedroom and moved into the attic on the 3rd floor. It wasn't because I was scared, but because I had to seize this opportunity with the college entrance exams. My past life taught me that the most important thing is to be strong on your own. The 3rd floor was quiet, with only me living there. I studied late into the night every night. I pretended not to see all the little games Sarah and Chris were playing. Finally, the exams were over. My scores were so high that Harvard and Yale were practically fighting over me. I chose Harvard. It wasn't until I held the acceptance letter in my hand that I could finally breathe. I pushed open the attic window and let out a long sigh. Now it was time to settle the score with Sarah, Chris, and my dad. When I came downstairs, I saw Sarah nestled in Chris's arms, smiling shyly. When he saw me, Chris immediately pushed Sarah away and walked over. "Hannah, you're finally down. You were so busy studying you didn't have time for me. You have to make it up to me," Chris said, reaching for my hand. I took a step back, putting distance between us. "But it looks like you already have company." I glanced pointedly at Sarah. Chris's face fell for a second before he recovered, feigning nonchalance. "Hannah, what are you thinking? I'm only close to Sarah because she's your cousin." The blunt words made Sarah's face turn pale. I, however, smiled with satisfaction. My engagement to Chris was an arranged marriage, an alliance between our powerful families that had been set since we were kids. That's why in my past life, I always saw him as my future husband. When Sarah stole him from me, I couldn't accept it. At this point in my previous life, thanks to my constant interference, Chris and Sarah were already deeply in love. But now, maybe because I wasn't there to push them together, Chris was still sneaking around with Sarah behind my back. Playing along with Chris would definitely upset Sarah. But it would disgust me even more. How could I break off this engagement as quickly as possible? An idea quickly formed in my mind. I looked at Chris with a loving gaze. "I'm going to marry you eventually anyway. Why don't we just get married now?" Married. Sarah was the first to cry out. "What, you don't like that idea, cousin? Or maybe you want to take my place and marry Chris?" The direct hit left Sarah trembling, at a loss for words. Chris looked awkward too. Clearly, he wasn't done enjoying the thrill of playing both sides. So I added more fuel to the fire. "Chris, I got into Harvard. If your mom knew, she'd be ecstatic." "You really got into Harvard?" Chris's eyes lit up. When I nodded, his face broke into a grin. Wait here, I'm going to tell my mom right now. The Zhang family had made their fortune in the coal mining business years ago. Even though that business had declined, they were still sitting on a pile of cash and had invested in other ventures. They had money, but no one in their family was book smart. The most educated among them was Chris. He was 3 years older than me and had gone straight into the workforce after high school, without even going to college. Because of this, people whispered behind their backs that the Zhangs were just a bunch of classless, nouveau riche upstarts. The more you lack something, the more you show it off. Mrs. Zhang would brag about my good grades wherever she went. Now that I was going to Harvard, she would definitely want me to marry into their family as soon as possible. The moment Chris left my house, Sarah couldn't hold it in any longer. She clutched her stomach and knelt before me. Hannah, I'm so sorry. I'm pregnant with Chris's baby. I know. After all, I was the one who poked holes in their condoms with a needle. My calm words made Sarah's crying stop. How could you know? I just smirked, said nothing and went upstairs. It looked like there was going to be a big showdown this afternoon. I needed to rest up and save my energy. Bang, bang, bang. I was woken up by a furious knocking on my door. Then came my dad's irritated voice from outside. Locking your door in your own house? All you do is study and sleep. I might as well be raising a pig. Why can't you be more like your cousin? She gets up early every day to cook, and she, frowning. I walked to the door and opened it. Seeing my expressionless face, my dad's lecture stopped short. His face then flushed with anger. You brat, how dare you look at me like that? He shouted, raising his hand to slap me. I quickly moved downstairs, and his hand hit nothing but air. Downstairs, Mr. and Mrs. Zhang and Chris were all laughing happily. Their smiles grew even wider when they saw me. Standing to the side, pouring tea, was Sarah, her eyes filled with tears. Looks like the Zhang family didn't know about Sarah's pregnancy yet. And here I thought Sarah was so capable. Looks like I'll have to be the one to burst this bubble. Mr. Zhang, Mrs. Zhang, I said, walking up to Chris's mom. Mrs. Zhang immediately spotted the Harvard acceptance letter in my hand and took it, examining it over and over. She passed the letter to Mr. Zhang, then grabbed my hand. Our Hannah is just so brilliant. I absolutely adore you. When my dad came downstairs, she eagerly turned to him. Our families will be joined soon enough. Chris is already in his 20s, and Hannah's a legal adult. Why don't we have the wedding first and they can get the license later? What do you think? The Zhang family was more powerful than ours. Hearing Mrs. Zhang's proposal, my dad temporarily shelved his annoyance with me and forced a smile. Of course, that sounds great. So, when should we set the date? Watching Mr. and Mrs. Zhang and my dad start to plan my wedding to Chris, I found it utterly ridiculous. My mom was still at the office, and they were blatantly disrespecting her. I looked over at Sarah. Her eyes were glued to Chris. But Chris, who usually melted under Sarah's gaze, was now sitting up straight, completely ignoring her signals. TSK. When it came to money, their love didn't seem to count for much. How about next month? We can have the wedding before Hannah starts school. I think that works. As Mr. and Mrs. Zhang and my dad sealed the deal, I spoke up. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang, I want to marry Chris too. But, I cast an accusing look at Sarah and said in a heartbroken voice, but she seduced Chris behind my back and is now carrying his child. My words shocked everyone in the room. Hannah, are you sure you're not mistaken? She's your cousin. I wish I were mistaken, but she told me herself not too long ago. The eye drops I'd put in earlier finally came in handy. A tear rolled down my cheek. Plop. I lowered my head, pretending to cry, but I watched Sarah out of the corner of my eye. Of the 3 Sue brothers, only my dad went to college and married my mom. He used my mom's family connections to start the Sue Corporation, but my mom was the one with the real power. My dad was just a president in name only. As for my dad's 2 brothers and their families, although my dad secretly helped them out and made their lives much better, they were still worlds apart from us. Sarah had envied me since we were kids. Now that I'd laid it all out, if Sarah didn't seize this chance to marry into a rich family, I'd lose all respect for her. Fortunately, she didn't disappoint me this time. With all eyes on her, Sarah knelt before Mr. and Mrs. Zhang. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang, Chris and I are truly in love. Before they could even react, Chris shot up from his seat. I used protection. How could you be pregnant? With that one sentence, he confirmed everything. Chris, I don't know how this happened either. Didn't you say you didn't even like Hannah, that she was boring and dull, and that you'd break off the engagement to be with me? You also said, shut your mouth. An enraged Chris slapped Sarah across the face. The next second, Mr. Zhang kicked Chris in the stomach. You bastard. You've shamed the entire Zhang family. Why are you hitting our son? Mrs. Zhang protested. It's obvious this slut Sarah seduced him. If you're going to hit anyone, hit her. Mrs. Zhang grabbed a handful of Sarah's hair. My dad rushed to intervene. Furious, Mrs. Zhang started scratching at my dad too. Afraid of getting his face scratched, my dad stepped back, leaving Sarah to be beaten on the floor by Mrs. Zhang. Unable to escape, Sarah suddenly clutched her stomach. The baby, my baby. A streak of crimson flowed from between her legs onto the floor. Terrified of being involved in a potential death, Mrs. Zhang immediately stopped and called 911. Half an hour later, Sarah was carried out on a stretcher. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang, Chris, and my dad followed frantically behind. I sat on the living room sofa, watching them leave, a cold smirk on my lips. Just then, a dark glare shot my way. It was my dad. He had turned around abruptly and caught the smile on my face. I instinctively wiped the smile away, but then I realized I wasn't the weak, powerless girl he used to push around. I lifted my head and gave my dad a defiant grin. Seeing me challenge him for the first time, my dad's anger flared, and he looked like he was about to come back and deal with me. But the ambulance outside couldn't wait. He had no choice but to get in and leave. Not long after the ambulance drove off, my mom came home. She was in a tailored business suit, her hair in a bun. At over 40, she had fine lines around her eyes but still possessed a certain charm. Her hair was slightly disheveled, a clear sign she had rushed back. Hannah, your aunt called and said something happened. What's going on? Busy with her career, her tone was a bit cold, but her eyes were full of concern. Unfortunately, I didn't see that concern in my past life. Back then, it never occurred to me that my mom worked so hard for my sake. I just thought she only cared about her job and making money, and didn't love me at all. I was rebellious as a child and loved to defy her. When she gave up the Sioux Corporation and divorced my dad, with her only condition being that she take me with her, I stubbornly chose to stay with my dad because I couldn't stand the thought of losing to Sarah. In the end, a disappointed mom gave up everything, left with nothing, and moved abroad. Thinking about it made my nose sting. Mom, I said, throwing myself into her arms and hugging her tightly. Mom, you're finally back. In my past life, my mom and I were never very close. Since my rebirth, we've become much closer. Still, compared to a typical mother-daughter relationship, there was still some distance between us. My mom's body stiffened at first, then she relaxed, patting my back awkwardly. Hannah, were you wronged? Yeah, I nodded, and told her everything that had happened today. Chris and Sarah were secretly together, and they even had a baby. That's outrageous. My mom fumed. I'm going to go settle the score with them. The Zhang family and my brother's family better give me an explanation today. With that, my mom grabbed my hand and pulled me out the door. She drove me to the hospital. When we arrived, Sarah was lying weakly in a hospital bed. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang, Chris, and my dad were all in the room. The other three looked grim, but my dad was fussing over Sarah. Sarah, does it hurt? Are you hungry? If you're uncomfortable, just tell your uncle. My baby, Sarah cried, touching her stomach. My dad's voice became even gentler. The baby's fine. You just need to rest and get better. Don't worry about anything else. Thank you, uncle. Ha. My mom, unable to listen anymore, pushed open the door and scoffed. You're never this attentive with Hannah. Anyone who didn't know better would think Sarah was your illegitimate daughter, not your niece. My mom was my perfect spokesperson, saying everything I wanted to say. Unsurprisingly, my dad got angry too. A failure in his career, he always tried to dominate my mom with his temper. Rose, what nonsense are you talking about? I'd seen this side of my dad many times. But this time, I caught a hint of something I'd never noticed before on his face. Guilt. I looked at my dad, then at Sarah on the bed. A wild idea started to form in my mind. Nonsense. Sarah even dared to steal Hannah's fiancé. She's that shameless, and you're still defending her. Do you even care about your daughter and me? Sarah is just young and naive. Besides, she's not a stranger, she's my niece. Seeing that a huge fight was about to break out, I quickly grabbed my mom's hand. Mom. My mom took a deep breath, temporarily suppressing her anger towards my dad, and turned her attention to Mr. and Mrs. Zhang. The two, who had been enjoying the show, immediately tensed up. Rose, about that. Don't call me that. Since your son doesn't know how to behave, let's just call off this marriage. Before Mr. and Mrs. Zhang could respond, my dad rushed forward. What a waste to call it off. Why don't we let Sarah marry Chris in Hannah's place? Absolutely not. Mrs. Zhang's eyes widened. Hannah got into Harvard. And Sarah? She goes to some no-name college, and comes from the countryside. The Zhang family would never accept a daughter-in-law like that. In my opinion, Sarah should just get an abortion, go back to where she came from, and we'll pretend this never happened. We can't let one little slut ruin the harmony between our two families, right, Rose? Mrs. Zhang looked at my mom. My mom glanced at my dad's livid face. She patted my hand reassuringly, then said casually, I suppose that could work. Seeing my mom give in, Mrs. Zhang let out a huge sigh of relief. In that case, I'll have the doctor prepare for the abortion procedure right away, she said, about to make the arrangements. Sarah, who had been lying in bed too weak to speak, suddenly jumped off the bed and hugged Chris's leg. Chris, how can you do this to me? Sobi, Sobi, Sobi. She cried a river of tears. Chris's face showed a flicker of conflict. Seeing this, Mrs. Zhang was furious. You little tramp, get your hands off my son, she yelled, trying to pull Sarah away. Just then, two figures burst into the room. You dare bully my daughter, I'll fight you to the death. It was Sarah's parents. They had clearly just gotten the news and rushed over. Seeing Sarah being bullied, they shoved Mrs. Zhang aside and started hitting her. Mr. Zhang joined the fray. Sarah's parents were used to farm work and were strong. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang were no match for them. Seeing his parents getting beaten and screaming, Chris jumped in too. The six of them ended up in a tangled mess on the floor. Pfft, I couldn't help but laugh. My laughter caught my dad's attention. He strode towards me, fuming. Hannah, you've gone too far. If it weren't for you, things would never have gotten to this point. Me? What does it have to do with me? Isn't it Sarah who was shameless? You shut up. I won't. What, is it true what Mom said? Is Sarah your illegitimate daughter and not your niece? At my words, my dad's face turned purple with rage. Nonsense. I'm going to teach you a lesson today, he roared, raising his hand towards me. My mom instinctively shielded me. You dare. Why wouldn't I dare? Rose, if you try to stop me, I'll hit you too. Ha. A cold, mocking young voice came from outside the hospital room. This is hilarious. I've never seen a father who can't stand to see his own daughter succeed. I turned around and saw a face that was both strange and familiar. The young man had delicate, well-defined features and was incredibly handsome. The scrape on his cheek and the blood at the corner of his mouth didn't detract from his good looks. In fact, they added a touch of wild charm. But his eyes held a clear hostility, giving him a fierce air. It was my high school classmate Leo. After high school graduation, I lost touch with most of my classmates. The reason he seemed familiar was that I had happened to see him once just before I was reborn. I was walking home from work as usual when two men blocked my path. Leo pulled up in a luxury car. He just honked the horn, and the two men ran off scared. I thanked him and he said, no need to thank me, old classmate. Only then did I dredge up the few fragmented memories I had of him. I was grateful, but also deeply embarrassed. My high school classmate was so successful, while I, snapping back to the present, I looked at his face again. He wasn't as composed as he was when I saw him before my rebirth. He seemed much younger, more boyish, but still just as handsome. Who do you think you are? This is my family's business. It's not for some little punk like you to butt in. Today, I'm going to discipline my own daughter. My dad, humiliated by an outsider's mockery, felt his pride sting even more. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to hit me. My mom shielded me, but his hand didn't stop. He was really going to hit my mom too. I moved to block his hand, But another hand shot out before mine, gripping my dad's arm tightly. It was Leo. My furious dad wanted to teach Leo a lesson too, but with his arm held fast, he couldn't move an inch. As they faced off, Leo looked relaxed, while my dad's face turned the color of a beet. Finally, medical staff noticed the commotion and rushed into the room to break it up. My dad took the opportunity to pull his hand back and turned to check on Sarah. I turned to thank Leo, but he had already turned and left. At the end of the long hallway, his figure looked thin and solitary. A lonely aura surrounded him. Half an hour later, thanks to the hospital staff's intervention, everyone in the room had finally calmed down. But apart from my dad, who was feigning concern for Sarah while actually staying out of it, everyone else had scratched faces and disheveled, pathetic appearances. The Zhang family held their chins high, arrogant and defiant. Sarah's parents, on the other hand, hung their heads looking anxious. Their biggest dream was for Sarah to marry into a rich family, but they had just beaten up that rich family on the floor. The baby in Sarah's stomach must be aborted, Mr. Zhang declared angrily. Mrs. Zhang chimed in, I would rather die than let Sarah marry into our family. How can you say that? Sarah's father protested. Your son got our Sarah pregnant. If you don't take responsibility, we'll go to your company and cause a scene. Let everyone judge who's right. His words made Mr. and Mrs. Zhang's faces darken. 20,000. That's a human life. You think you can buy a life for 20,000? You. Mr. Zhang cut Sarah's mother off. 50,000. This time, as soon as the words left his mouth, Sarah's parents eagerly nodded. Deal. On the hospital bed, Sarah fainted. For real this time. Unfortunately, even fainting couldn't save her from the operating table. Having dealt with Sarah's family, an exhausted Mr. and Mrs. Zhang turned to my mom. Rose, once the baby is gone, we can have Chris and Hannah get married. What do you think? My mom's eyes flickered. That depends on how your son behaves. Don't worry, if Chris messes around again, I'll break his legs, Mrs. Zhang said, pulling him over. Chris nodded his promise distractedly. His eyes kept darting in the direction Sarah had been wheeled away. Without further conversation, my mom took me and left. In the car, my mom asked me while driving, what do you think about the marriage with Chris? I wouldn't touch that scumbag with a 10-foot pole. Just thinking about Chris made me sick to my stomach. Cheating, cowardly, irresponsible, he didn't have a single good quality. I must have been blind in my past life to fight with Sarah over a piece of trash. My words seemed to lift a weight off my mom's shoulders. So, what do you want to do now? I want to break off the engagement with Chris. Dragging things out with Chris would certainly hurt him and Sarah more, but just the thought of being his fiancée made me feel disgusted. Mom, if Sarah has the abortion, won't the Zhang family just keep clinging to me? I told her my worry. She smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, leave it to me. When we got home, my mom first made a call to Mrs. Zhang. Mrs. Zhang, has Sarah had the abortion yet? Not yet. The doctor said they have to wait for her to wake up and check her condition before operating. I think that little tramp is faking it. Of course. What kind of decent person seduces her own cousin's fiancé? Don't get soft-hearted now. It's not like Chris can't have other children. When he and Hannah get married, they can have 10 or more. After ending the call, my mom looked at me. Before I could ask, she explained, Chris is an only child. His parents went through a lot to have him. I heard Mr. Zhang has fertility issues. So, Mrs. Zhang might not let Sarah go through with the surgery because she wants an heir? My eyes lit up. My mom smiled and tapped my forehead. Smart girl. That way, the Zhang family won't have the nerve to bother us anymore. And as for Sarah, even if she has the baby, the Zhangs will never accept her. Hearing this, I looked at my mom with admiration. Mom, you're amazing. My mom smiled and hugged me, stroking my head. No one gets to bully my daughter. Feeling the warmth of my mom's embrace, my nose started to sting. She had said the same thing in my past life. And how did I respond? I said, if you really don't want me to be bullied, you should get Chris back for me. But Hannah, Chris isn't worth it. Whether he's worth it or not, I just like him. I was like someone possessed, my only desire to tear Sarah and Chris apart. Unable to dissuade me, my mom swallowed her pride and went to Mr. and Mrs. Zhang, only to be looked down on by them. Of course. Chris had treated me so badly, yet I still refused to let go. With a daughter like me, it was no wonder people looked down on my mom. Hannah, what's wrong? Sensing my emotional turmoil, my mom asked with concern. I buried my face in her chest and mumbled, Mom, I don't think my dad deserves to be my father. Just as my mom and I hadn't been close, there had always been a barrier between her and my dad. My mom was always busy with work, while my dad spent her money showing off everywhere. Thinking back now, their relationship had been broken for a long time. My mom only stayed with him for my sake. But now I saw it clearly. I didn't need a father who didn't care about me. I hoped my mom would ask for a divorce. But she didn't. She just held me tightly, and after a long moment, let out a sigh. I was a little disappointed, but I understood. After all, in my last life, my mom only filed for divorce a year later, after I had been driven to a mental breakdown by Chris, Sarah, and my dad. She had completely given up on him and wanted to take me away. But now, other than defending Sarah, my dad hadn't done anything completely unforgivable. As much as I wanted to get rid of him, I knew some things couldn't be rushed. In the afternoon, my mom went out to plan my college acceptance party. I called all the household staff together and gave an order. Throw all of Sarah's things out. Yes, miss. I had put up with Sarah for a while for the sake of my studies. From now on, I wouldn't give anyone the chance to hurt me again. After all of Sarah's belongings were thrown out, the staff cleaned my room, and I moved back down from the attic. That evening, my dad came home right after my mom did. When he saw us, his arrogant demeanor was gone, replaced by a sheepish look. He walked up to my mom and took her hand. At the hospital today, I was just so angry. Please don't be mad at me. Usually, even when my dad knew he was wrong, he would never apologize. He was definitely up to something. My mom pulled her hand away, her expression cool. From the look on your face, Sarah didn't have the abortion, did she? Caught. My dad looked a bit embarrassed. Chris had a checkup. He has a low sperm count, so it might be difficult for him to have kids in the future. This was a last resort. So? My mom asked, looking at him steadily. Facing my mom's composure, my dad's guilt turned to anger. It's Hannah's own fault for not being likable enough for Chris. Since Sarah is already pregnant with his child, it's better to just give the marriage to her. My mom had a temper too, and her face darkened instantly. Daniel, I don't care about this marriage, but what are you trying to say? What do you mean Hannah isn't likable? In your eyes, is your niece Sarah the only one who's likable? Isn't she? My dad slammed the table and stood up, pointing at me. Look at her, with that face like I owe her $1 million. How is that likable? Not like Sarah, who brings me tea, fusses over me, and, you shut up. My mom was so angry her chest was heaving. Afraid she would make herself sick, I quickly went to her side and rubbed her back. Mom, let's not be angry. It's fine if Dad doesn't love me. I still have you. Seeing my concern, my mom took a deep breath, trying to suppress her rage. Ignoring my dad, she took my hand and led me upstairs. Upstairs, she looked at me. Your father, She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. I squeezed her hand back. Mom, in my heart, I don't have a father. From the time I was little, he never cared about me, never took care of me, never came to my parent-teacher conferences. He was never a part of my life, big or small. In fact, he feels no love for me, only disgust. But he's different with Sarah. With her, he's like a real father. Sometimes I even thinking of my suspicion, I gritted my teeth and continued. I think Sarah is his real daughter, and I'm just a stumbling block who stole her place. Hannah. My mom gasped, shocked by my words. I can promise you, you are your father's child. As for Sarah, your dad is selfish. He's always wanted to leech off me to support his two brothers. In his mind, he and his brothers are the real family, and I'm an outsider. He puts you in the same category as me, which is why he's like that with you. Sarah is definitely not your father's child, don't worry. If he doesn't love you, Mom will love you twice as much. I nodded, not dwelling on the issue anymore, and changed the subject. Dad wants Sarah to marry Chris. Did Mr. and Mrs. Zhang accept her because she's pregnant? If that was the case, it would be letting Sarah off too easily. Of course not. I know Mr. and Mrs. Zhang too well. They're probably planning to have Sarah secretly give birth to the child, and then have you and Chris raise it. They sent your father back to persuade us. But your father would never let his precious niece suffer that kind of injustice. So he came back hoping I would step in and convince the Zhangs to let Sarah marry into their family. I'm not that stupid. After that fight with your father just now, he probably won't be able to bring it up again. After listening to my mom, I couldn't help but give her a thumbs up. My mom is the best. Of course. My mom said with a proud look. Your acceptance party is in 3 days. I'll text you the hotel address later. For the next few days, just focus on inviting your friends to the party. Leave everything else to me. At the party, I'll announce the cancellation of your engagement to Chris. Okay, Mom. Back in my room, I was still a little puzzled. My mom was smarter than I thought. She was so sure that Sarah wasn't my dad's daughter. Could it be that I was really wrong about this? I shook my head, pushing the thought aside for now. I took out my phone and sent invitations to a few close friends for my acceptance party. At the very end, I thought of Leo. He was in my class, but I barely had any memories of him from high school. I remembered he always sat in the back row, either sleeping or playing on his phone during class. The teachers didn't bother with him. He was always getting into fights and getting his parents called to the school. He was the classic rebel student, but because he was so handsome, his desk was always stuffed with love letters. He never touched them, just threw them in the trash periodically. We barely interacted, yet he had helped me twice, in this life and the last. After a moment of hesitation, I sent Leo a message. Since I didn't know him well, my tone was quite polite. My acceptance party is in 3 days. Are you free? To my surprise, he replied quickly with a single word. Okay. My close friends, whether they did well on their exams or not, were all having their acceptance parties around this time. Today, I got ready to go out. As I did, my dad, who was sitting on the sofa, looked me up and down, his eyes sharp. Hannah, is there something you need? My voice was cold. Frowning with displeasure, my dad said, your cousin is still in the hospital recovering. How can you have the heart to go out and have fun? By that logic, your niece is still lying in a hospital bed. How can you have the heart to sit at home drinking tea? I think you should be at the hospital, watching over her day and night. My blunt retort made my dad's face darken. I was up all night last night. I couldn't stay awake today. Oh. In a hurry to leave, I couldn't be bothered to waste any more time on him. As I reached the door, my dad's voice followed me again. Remember to find time to visit your cousin. He probably didn't want me to visit Sarah so much as he wanted Sarah to have a chance to work on me. Ignoring him completely, I walked out the door. After attending my friend's party, on the way back, I had the driver take a detour to the hospital. When I arrived, Sarah was sitting up in bed, eating fruit that her parents were feeding her. Our Sarah is so clever. Looks like you'll be marrying into a rich family soon. What's the use of that Hannah being good at school? She can't even keep a man. When you marry Chris, have your uncle give you a big dowry. The 3 of them were counting their chickens before they hatched. I chose that moment to push the door open and walk in. But Mrs. Zhang just called me. She said there's absolutely no way Chris will marry Sarah. After Sarah has the baby, she's supposed to pack her bags and go back to the countryside. My words made the faces of everyone in the room change dramatically. Hannah, it's already come to this. Even if you marry Chris, you'll only have his body, not his heart. At this point, Sarah's mother's triumphant expression vanished, replaced by a look of sorrow. Hannah, you've had a good life since you were a child. You've never lacked anything. Sarah is different, can't you just not fight with her over Chris? As Sarah's mother spoke, Sarah was already in tears. Hannah, for my sake, since I'm your older sister, can you please let me go? Sarah's father, however, remained defiant. Hannah, even if you don't agree to cancel the engagement, your father will find a way to make Sarah marry Chris. If you don't let go now, you'll be the one who loses face in the end. This family of 3 was putting on a show, using both soft and hard tactics. If this were the weak, kind-hearted me from my past life, I probably would have thought it was all my fault. But, what do you mean? Let you go? The one who shamelessly seduced my fiancé and got pregnant with his child was Sarah. I must have had some seriously bad luck to get tangled up with people like you. I'm telling you, Sarah, no matter what tricks you have up your sleeve, I will not break off the engagement with Chris. Go ahead and have the baby. When it's born, it will call me Mom, and you will always be hidden away. At best, the baby might call you Auntie. Hearing this, everyone in the room was stunned into silence. Crash. The cafeteria lady who had just walked in with food accidentally dropped a bowl. I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy. She frantically tried to pick up the broken ceramic pieces and ended up cutting her hand. Unable to watch, I stepped forward. Let me. I knelt and helped her pick up the broken pieces. After I finished, I stood up to throw them in the trash. As I looked up, my eyes unintentionally fell on the cafeteria lady's face, and I couldn't look away. She looked so much like Sarah. The suspicion that I had pushed down resurfaced. Noticing me staring at her face, the cafeteria lady quickly lowered her head and said, "Thank you. It's nothing." I patted her shoulder reassuringly and in the process, plucked a single hair from her head. Just as I stepped out of the hospital room, I saw Chris. He looked incredibly excited. "Hannah, this is great. You don't mind that Sarah is having my baby, and you're willing to be the child's mother. Don't worry, I'll be good to you from now on," he said, his eyes full of deep affection. It seemed he had overheard what I said in the room. I was about to puke. How blind was I in my past life to be upset that Sarah stole this piece of work from me? What about Sarah? I deliberately raised my voice. "Once she has the baby, we'll just give her some money," Chris said dismissively. Inside the room, Chris's words caused another uproar. Sarah fainted again. Whether it was real or fake, I didn't care. I looked at Chris with a blank expression. What I said just now was just to spite Sarah. The moment you hooked up with her, we were done. Please tell your parents that when you get back, so they stop telling everyone that I'm their future daughter-in-law. Being associated with people like you is pretty embarrassing. After saying my piece, I ignored Chris's reaction and walked away. The day before my acceptance party, my mom and I came home after picking out my dress. We found Sarah and her parents in our house. The three of them were lounging on the sofa, cracking sunflower seeds and watching TV. The villa was a mess, with sunflower seed shells and spilled tea all over the floor. "What are you doing here?" I asked, looking at them. Sarah's father leaned back further into the sofa. "Hannah, what kind of question is that? We're family. Sarah just got out of the hospital, and she can't be inconvenienced. Where else would she stay?" At that moment, a maid came downstairs carrying boxes. I looked closer and saw they were my things from my room. Noticing my stare, Sarah said with an innocent look, "Hannah, your dad said I need a good environment to recover, so please, you'll have to stay in the attic or a guest room." Unbelievable. They'd taken over my room again without even telling me. I was furious. Just as I was about to speak, my mom beat me to it. "Security, throw these three out. You dare. Do you know who I am? I'm the older brother of the man of this house. If you lay a hand on me, I'll have you all fired." Sarah's father blustered, but the security guards completely ignored them. After all, this villa was a wedding gift to my mom from my grandparents. The three of them, thrown out, sat on the curb in front of our house cursing. I said calmly, "Keep yelling, and I'll call the police." I took out my phone. As I dialed 911, the three of them instantly fell silent. They scrambled up from the ground, grabbed their few belongings, and left. "Sarah," I called out to her. "What do you want now?" Sarah couldn't pretend anymore. She clutched her stomach, her eyes full of defensiveness and hatred. "Don't you dare touch my baby." "Ha!" I scoffed. "A baby alone won't get you into the Zhang family. The Zhangs care most about their reputation. The only way they might let you in the front door is if you make a huge public scene about being pregnant with Chris's child, so everyone knows. Why are you being so nice?" Sarah looked touched. She wasn't a complete idiot, though. A moment later, she figured it out. "Hannah, you're doing this on purpose. You want the Zhang family to be disgraced too." "Yes, I am. I've given you the opportunity. Take it or leave it." Not long after Sarah's family left, my dad came home. In the living room, he and my mom had an unprecedented argument. About me and about Sarah. The argument started with Sarah seducing Chris and spiraled out into much deeper issues. My dad felt that for years, my mom had looked down on him because she was the breadwinner, which made him feel emasculated. My mom, on the other hand, aside from feeling hurt for me, was most wounded by my dad's years of emotional neglect. My usually elegant and composed mother finally broke down. "Daniel, you are a coward, you are useless, you are a chauvinist. You don't protect your own wife and child. You are heartless and blind. Rose, you're asking for it." My dad raised his hand to hit my mom. Of course, his hand never landed. It was caught mid-air by a security guard. "Beat him up," my mom said, her voice cold. "The harder you hit him, the bigger the bonus." For the next few minutes, the living room was filled with Daniel's screams. I had wanted to do this for a long time. In my past life, even though I ended up at a community college, I could have made a decent life for myself through hard work. But it was Daniel, Sarah, and Chris. No matter what job I found, they would use their power to get me fired. My miserable past life was partly my own fault for being so blind, but from start to finish, I never did anything wrong. It was these evil people who kept pushing me. From the moment I was reborn, I wanted to beat Daniel to a pulp. But now that it was actually happening, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Because of my mom. Her face was filled with pain. "Mom," I said, going to her and gently taking her hand. "I'm fine, sweetie." My mom managed a weak smile. When Daniel was beaten so badly he couldn't make a sound, my mom told the guards, "Stop." I was still unwilling to let him off so easily. My mom patted my hand reassuringly. "Your party is tomorrow. It wouldn't be good if things got out of hand." So I didn't say anything more. Daniel was taken to the hospital, and my mom hired someone to stand guard at his door. That night, the light in my mom's room stayed on. Worried, I went to her door and saw her inside, gathering all the photos of her and my dad. She looked at them for a moment, reminiscing, and then viciously tore them to shreds. That's right. I only saw how terrible my dad was, but I never saw everything my mom and dad had been through together. Sensing my presence, my mom beckoned me over. I went and nestled into her arms. My mom's voice came from above me. "When I wanted to marry your father, your grandparents were against it. They said he came from a poor background and wasn't very capable. But I was fooled by his sweet talk and was determined to marry him. Now it seems I really made the wrong choice." "Mom, everyone makes wrong choices in life. The important thing is to realize your mistake in time. Besides," I looked up at her, "if you hadn't been with Dad, maybe you wouldn't have had such a smart and wonderful daughter like me." My playful words brought a smile to my mom's face. She looked at me and asked seriously, "Hannah, if your dad and I get a divorce, would you be okay with that?" "Yes." "And would you choose to stay with me?" "Yes." This time, I answered without a shred of hesitation. My answer seemed to give my mom strength, and her face regained its confidence. "After your party tomorrow, I'll file for divorce." "Okay." I hugged my mom and slept in her bed with her. Only after her breathing became steady did I get up. I found one of my dad's short hairs on the pillow and left the bedroom with it. The next morning, I made an excuse to go out, went to the hospital to get a sample of Sarah's hair. Then I submitted 2 sets for DNA testing, one for Sarah and my dad, and one for Sarah and the cafeteria lady. When I got home, my mom and I left for the hotel together. As noon approached, guests began to arrive. My dad, who was supposed to be recovering in the hospital, insisted on getting up and coming to my party. I was a little worried he would cause a scene, but my mom assured me he was too vain for that, which put me at ease. Just as my mom predicted, my dad, who usually wouldn't even give me a second glance, was now all smiles. The grin was so wide that even the bandages on his face couldn't hide it. "Otsu, your daughter has really made you proud." "Of course. She takes after me." Someone noticed his battered appearance and asked with concern, "What happened to you? How did you get so injured?" A shadow passed through his eyes, but the smile on my dad's face remained bright. Well, I was so happy my daughter got into Harvard that I had a little too much to drink and took a tumble." Hearing this, my mom and I exchanged a look, both trying to suppress a giggle. I had to admit, he was good at making up excuses. His talent for lying through his teeth really came in handy. Wave after wave of guests arrived. Finally, to my mom's relief, my grandparents showed up. They had been angry with my mom for stubbornly marrying my dad. Over the years, although they secretly helped her with her career, they had almost no contact with her openly. Every time my mom went to see them, they would give her the cold shoulder. Only when I was around would the two old folks cheer up. But I knew they were just using me as an excuse to care for my mom. Their love for me was an extension of their love for her. "Dad, Mom, you're finally here," my mom said with a sigh of relief. My grandparents put on a proud face. "If we weren't worried about spoiling Hannah's party, we wouldn't have come." "Yes, yes, of course. Let me show you in." My mom went to help my grandparents. My classmates had all arrived, as had the Zhang family, and even Sarah's family. As noon approached and the guests had nearly all arrived, I still hadn't seen Leo. It was only then that I felt I might have been too forward. I didn't know what Leo's grades were like or which university he got into. Inviting him like this. Just as I was thinking, a familiar voice came from above my head. "Excuse me, where do I sit?" I looked up and met Leo's handsome eyes. "I'll take you," I said, a smile blooming on my face without me even realizing it. I led Leo to the table where my high school classmates were sitting. When they saw Leo, a few girls who had been chatting excitedly suddenly blushed and fell silent. "Hannah, you're amazing. You even managed to invite the school heartthrob who never gets close to anyone." I just smiled and didn't say anything in response. The Sioux Corporation was a big company, and most of the guests at my party were business partners. I followed my parents around, toasting the guests. When we got to the Zhang family's table, someone asked, "Why are your in-laws sitting with us?" My mom smiled and said, "Actually, Hannah and Chris have called off their engagement. It was just a joke from many years ago, not to be taken seriously." Everyone here was sharp. No one pushed the issue. It was Mr. and Mrs. Zhang who looked unhappy, but they held back and said nothing. My mom wanted to spare the Zhangs some dignity, but I didn't. How could they do something so undignified and expect to walk away with their pride intact? The world doesn't work that way. I looked at Sarah. She was clutching her stomach, looking conflicted, as if debating whether to reveal her pregnancy with Chris's child right then and there. "Fine." I started walking towards Chris, who was standing not far from her. Halfway there, my foot suddenly twisted, and I stumbled forward. Right in front of me was Sarah. Just as I was about to fall on top of her, a strong arm wrapped around my waist. It was Leo. He had caught me. "Thanks," I said, steadying myself in his arms. Sarah, her nerves shot, completely lost it. She jumped up from her chair, clutching her stomach and pointing at me. "Hannah, you did that on purpose. You can't stand that I'm carrying Chris's child, and you wanted to get rid of my baby." Sarah's outburst caused an uproar. Everyone in the room instantly understood. So, the reason I broke up with Chris was that he had hooked up with my cousin, and they even had a child together. The people here were all concerned with appearances, and many of them looked at the Zhang family with disdain. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang cared most about their reputation. Mrs. Zhang immediately denied it. "Sarah, what nonsense are you talking about? Our Chris is not someone you can just hook up with whenever you want." At this point, Sarah had nothing to lose. "Mrs. Zhang, you know perfectly well whether the baby in my belly is Chris's or not. If you really won't admit it, we can just do a DNA test after the baby is born." "You slut, I'll tear your mouth apart." Seeing that the Zhangs and Sarah's family were about to start fighting again, my mom had security throw both families out. The room fell silent once more. Everyone looked at me with sympathy. Everyone except my dad, of course. His face was ashen, and he looked at me as if he wanted to eat me alive. As soon as we got home after the party, my dad exploded. "How can you two be so vicious? Sarah is already miserable enough, pregnant with Chris's child and not accepted by his family. Do you have to push her to her death? But isn't this what she deserves? Hannah, don't think I won't teach you a lesson." My dad strode towards me. The security guard stood in front of me, forming a protective circle. "If you don't want to end up back in the hospital, go ahead and try. I knew you were no good, you." "Enough." My mom, unable to take it anymore, cut my dad off. "Daniel, let's get a divorce." "A divorce? Rose, are you kidding me?" My dad's voice was filled with shock and contempt. Clearly, in his mind, no matter how he treated my mom and me, she would never leave him. "Yes, a divorce," my mom said, her voice firm. After a moment to process this, my dad sneered. Fine by me. We split the assets 50-50. Why should you get half? What have you ever contributed to this family besides eating, drinking, and playing around? I protested. But my mom said fine. I'll have the lawyer draft the papers later. Then it's settled. After my dad went upstairs, my mom looked at me reassuringly. Hannah, since we've decided on a divorce, it's best to make it a clean break. Money is something mom can earn again. Besides, he is your father after all. It's fine to give him some money. My mom had a point, so I didn't say anything. Seeing that my mom was okay, I told her I was going out to see a friend. In reality, I went to the hospital. I hoped my suspicion was wrong. If it was, I could let Daniel have some of the assets to spare my mom more pain. At the hospital, I easily got the test results. When I opened the report and saw the results, I was so angry I could barely breathe. I was right. Sarah was Daniel's daughter with that cafeteria lady. I immediately took the results home to show my mom. My mom, who had been grieving the end of her decades-long marriage, was consumed by rage when she found out my dad had cheated on her and had a child who was 3 years older than me. But that's my mom for you. Even in her anger, she didn't lose her head. She called my grandparents. She told them everything. My grandparents came over with my 3 uncles. My dad, who was taking a nap, was dragged out of bed by my uncles and beaten mercilessly. Already injured, he was left barely conscious. Then my eldest uncle placed a divorce agreement in front of him and told him to sign. When my dad saw that it stipulated he would leave with nothing, he refused to sign. My uncle sneered, "Daniel, you better think carefully. If you don't sign, I'll sue you for bigamy tomorrow and have you thrown in jail. Not only that, but from now on, I'll beat up your other family members every time I see them. None of you will ever get ahead in life." Finally realizing that his affair with Sarah was exposed, my dad's face turned ashen, and he signed his name. At that moment, my parents were officially divorced. From now on, he was no longer my father. Daniel was thrown out of the villa like a piece of trash. I'm so mad. If it weren't for Hannah, I would have made sure he went to prison, my uncles fumed. My mom pushed aside her own grief to comfort my grandparents and uncles. In the end, my grandparents and uncles, feeling sorry for my mom and me, insisted on having us stay with them for a while. At my grandparents' house, I felt a warmth I had never experienced before. It was so warm that I never wanted to go back. My mom also felt the villa was tainted with bad luck and sold it at a price well below market value. There was still over a month until the start of the semester at Harvard. My mom asked me, "What are your plans for now?" "Mom, I want to do an internship at the company. Now that the trash was taken out, it was time to make money. I needed to learn how to run the company so I could inherit the family business." Hearing my answer, my mom smiled. Good, that was my plan too. My mom took me shopping for a few business suits. Dressed in a suit with my long hair tied back, I looked in the mirror at a confident, assertive young woman, a far cry from the weak person I was in my past life. The next day, I went to the company with my mom. I watched as my mom gave orders to the HR department to fire everyone Daniel had hired. Soon, the phone in the CEO's office was ringing off the hook. Rose. We're family after all. What that bastard Daniel did has nothing to do with me. Sister-in-law, I've already cut ties with Daniel. Jobs are hard to find these days. Can't you, for old time's sake, not fire me? Faced with losing their income, the brotherly love Daniel was so proud of proved to be worthless. Unwilling to waste any more time, my mom blocked all of them. She assigned me to a senior employee, and I had a lot to learn every day. Amidst this busy schedule, news of the Zhang family and Sarah's family reached my ears, piece by piece. It wasn't that I wanted to hear it, but the Zhang family's recent scandals were so numerous that they became the talk of the town. After Sarah publicly announced her pregnancy at my party, Mr. and Mrs. Zhang, feeling utterly humiliated, forbade Chris from ever seeing her again. But whether it was because Chris was deeply in love or Sarah was just that manipulative, he started sneaking around with her behind his parents' backs. When Mrs. Zhang accidentally found out, she was so angry she had to be hospitalized. At the Zhang Corporation, their scandalous behavior caused several major partnership deals to fall through, resulting in massive losses. Watching the company's stock price fall day after day, Mr. Zhang was at his wit's end. And that wasn't all. It turned out Sarah had no idea she was an illegitimate child. When she found out the cafeteria lady was her real mother, she cursed both Daniel and her mom for being shameless. In a fit of rage, the stress caused her to lose the baby. Without the baby, Sarah's chances of marrying into the Zhang family were gone. Her status in her own family plummeted. She dropped the arrogant act and started trying to win Daniel over again. After all, Daniel had money. The reason Daniel had signed the divorce papers so readily was partly because he was afraid of jail and my uncles, and partly because he had a substantial amount of his own secret savings. But having grown accustomed to a life of luxury, he couldn't stand watching his savings dwindle. Lured in by his brother, he got hooked on gambling. In just 1 month, he lost millions. Without money to his name, Daniel could no longer command the flattery of his family and was kicked out of their house. A former neighbor mentioned that a disheveled and destitute Daniel had come looking for my mom and me at the villa, but of course, the house had long since been sold, and he couldn't find us. Listening to others gossip about the miserable state of those people now, I found that my heart was surprisingly calm. We were worlds apart now. Whether they lived well or poorly in the future, I would strive to become better and better. On the first day of school at Harvard, Chris blocked my path at the campus gate. "Hannah, I'm completely done with Sarah. We grew up together. We were childhood sweethearts. Can you please forgive me this one time?" The funny thing was, I could actually see a hint of genuine affection in his eyes. Some people are like that. They don't cherish what they have, but they long for what they can't get. Sorry, no. Looking at Chris for another second felt like a waste of my life. I walked right past him and onto the campus. A familiar figure came into view. It was Leo. He was also holding an acceptance letter. It was like he was waiting for me. When he saw me, he walked over and asked, "Want to go register together?" "Okay." I nodded, and we walked side by side. Don't dwell on the past, don't fear the future. I will ultimately become the person I want to be. The end.